honor mothers, and our mothers are very important to us, aren't they? The saying is that behind every successful man stands a mother. It's true. Today I'm taking for Mother's Day thought a text from Job. Job is applying it to himself, but where Job says, I'm going to say, mother. Job was a wise man. He did not know why he was so persecuted by Satan. We learned in Sabbath school that Satan took everything away from Job, even his health, and just left him dangling before death. But God had told Satan, don't you take his life. And Satan didn't dare disobey God, but he certainly did everything else he could to make Job say, there is no God. That's what Job's friends tried to tell him. And they weren't friends at all. They came and maligned Job, made fun of him. And Job said in one of his answers to his friends, my roots spread out to the waters. This is just the first half of the verse, but the most important one as we talk about our mothers. The roots spread out to the waters, and by that they grew luxuriantly. Talking of a tree. The tree that stands by the water seems to be growing stronger and has a longer taproot. This text from Job occurs in his early speech after he'd been afflicted by his friends more than actually Satan. The words that his friends said, they did not correspond with what he thought and what he believed. He tells of the ripeness of his days, when his life was full of happiness and dignity and usefulness. Anyone who knows brooks and creeks and rivers will find Job's words a vivid figure of speech. And so mothers too, they do their best, those that are good mothers, to reach out to where the rivers and streams and creeks are, because the water of life is necessary. We can live 30 days without eating any food, but we can only live 5 days without water. So water of life is important. That water of life will be one of the most important things during the millennium. It will pour out from underneath the altar in the New Jerusalem, drop down upon the earth here, and help the earth to grow, to give roots to the tree of life. I've always had a picture of that tree of life because my dad said it looked like the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is built with huge legs and an arch between them, so they were like a bridge. Now there was a 4-way bridge under the Eiffel Tower. And here, as we read about the tree of life, the roots of the tree of life are on each side of the river. And we get a peculiar look. Now how can a tree have roots on each side of a river? But if you look at it like the Eiffel Tower, you'll see how beautiful that would be. And so the tree of life, which gives forth the water of life, is necessary, for this water flows out of Jesus Christ. He presented that a number of times in his speech, that water of life is necessary. It has been pointed out that most people are too indifferent toward their roots. They don't care. They don't care if their roots are on the top of the ground and become powder and dust. We are not to be as stubble, which summer fires can devour easily, and we should not be as dry grass that sinks down and returns to powder and dust. Our roots are not to be as rottenness, nor are our blossoms to grow up as dust. We are to be like trees planted by the rivers of water. Psalm 1. That we can bring forth fruit in the proper seasons. And like vines whose branches run over the walls or over the stakes that are prepared for them, a grapevine that has a place to run will produce better grapes and more delicious fruit. Not like wild grapes that usually use a tree in which to grow. While I was reading these verses, I thought of a song. It's not in our hymnal, I don't think, but we used to sing quite often, just like a tree that's planted by the water, I shall not be moved. And it was a very revivalistic song, that we should be all like a tree. We are indifferent to roots because we are indifferent to becoming a good tree. Because a tree that grows has to stand against tornadoes, against birds. I was looking through the back part of our little home yesterday, and I was surprised how many trees are dying, and then I looked and saw that they were all filled with woodpecker holes. And I didn't realize there were that many woodpeckers like that. The holes are all about 3 to 4 inches in diameter. And that in one tree there were 6 of those holes. And no wonder the tree is dying. So if we are a tree, we have lots of things to contend with, don't we? If we are to remain true and faithful. And so people are indifferent to becoming trees. We find the important things of life to be in the realm of receiving, becoming. Why grow a spiritual value when you can just go out and buy something spiritual? You can buy your religion, you can buy what you believe, and it's there for sale. Why spend time on a great book when all you have to do is turn a knob on your TV? But what's on TV isn't what is in that great book. Why bother about consequences, about personal character, about the moral way that you are living? Why bother? It's better to be indifferent, isn't it? And so we are indifferent to roots. But for a moment, let us look at the testimony as Job looked at it, because he had strong roots. And even though he was tempted to die, he still remained faithful, and his integrity was so that he would not curse God. That's what God challenged Satan. Have you seen my servant Job? Oh yes, but you've got a hedge around him, as Brother John said this morning. Nothing's going to bother Job. You're taking such good care of him. All right, I'll remove the hedge, and he'll still be my child. And we know that Job's root held him. Now, mother's roots spread out to the waters. This statement is thrown into vivid contrast by another verse in the same drama of Job. And that is, her roots twine about a stone heap. Now why did Job say that? His friend says, Job, your roots are around a stone heap. Your roots aren't nice and deep and strong to hold you. Look at the shape you're in. You're sitting in ashes. All you have is this coarse cloth, like potato sacking, that would help him. His itching was so terrible. His pain was so terrible. And the air could go through the burlap. And so he was helped by that kind of clothing and sitting in ashes, which would be a little lie, L-Y-E, to help him to alleviate his itching and pains. You perhaps have witnessed such a situation. There is a birch tree. Brother Vernon took me up in Vermont one time to see his birch trees. He had a favorite song, you remember. All the colors of the birch tree, they were his. And here was, he says, now these two trees grew at the exact same time. But this one here grew near a spring, and its root can go right to the spring. But the other one grew on a rock ledge. And he says, I've been observing these since I was a little fellow. And that tree didn't grow more than 5 feet tall, the one that was planted or grew by itself on a rock ledge. But this one here, just a few feet from there, under that ledge was a spring. And this was a tree 20 feet tall and beautiful. He says the Indians would love to make a canoe out of this tree. Well, that's just thoughts that came to me when I read this here. Mother's roots spread out to waters. And in contrast, a poor mother's roots twine around a stone heap. Because there's not much to the roots that are on a stone heap. And so I have noticed that this is very possible between our good mothers and bad mothers. There were very few bad mothers when I was young, growing up, and today I can see in the papers how many poor mothers there are, because there are so many children that are abandoned by them, that are abused by them, that are neglected by them. And so these mothers have their roots on rocks. The place of the stone heap may have been an old well that dried up and did not spring any more with water. And there was no nourishment in those old stones. It is a frequent thought of the biblical writers that we must spread out our roots to life, to living waters. And then I have a whole list of Bible texts that we could go to telling what the scripture says about live near living water and drink living water. And my thoughts went then to my childhood. We lived in Bethany, Connecticut, and there was a little pond right near our home. And it wasn't big enough for us. We could wade in it up to here, but it was dangerous for us to dive in, and we wanted to dive. So we got a lot of clay mud together and dammed up the little lake, and we could see the lake then rising. We had it rise a foot higher than it actually was. And what I remember marvelously about this swimming hole was that as the lake rose, the grass that grew around it also stayed green, but it was underwater. And the pretty picture that it made, it looked like lace. And then I looked and saw other of the grasses get greener. as the summer went on, and the bushes around it would get larger, and it was really a joy. So more water in that little swimming hole helped the rest of the fauna to develop. The next year you could see maples and all kinds of other types of wood and berry bushes, and that raising that water actually helped the surrounding community. And so waters are important. Now what do we want to be? Do we want to be a luxuriant tree, or do we want to just be a tumbleweed? A tumbleweed comes from bushes that have been grown and would not put roots down, that lay on top of the ground. And a tumbleweed that whiffs its way happily along without any roots at all. Tumbleweed folks believe in nothing. They care for nothing. They seek for nothing. They interfere with nothing. They enjoy nothing, love nothing, hate nothing, find no purpose for anything, and only remain alive because there is nothing to die for. What a description of a tumbleweed, and that is a pretty good description of some people. But don't think these people couldn't move. Because if a wind comes along, you can't catch a tumbleweed. They're very agile. And so we can make up our mind whether we are going to be a tumbleweed or a tree that will bear fruit, bear nuts, or bear seed for the birds. We must not be discouraged when the tilled land of our lives sometimes grows weeds. It sometimes happens that a mother has a problem and weeds grow up around her and make her helpless. The fertilizing of a plot of life may have strange effects. It may bring up an ugly weed from a seed we didn't even know was there. The same stimulus which produces a saintly quality may intensify an ugly trait. How is it that some saints can be so ugly at times? I see a man whom I admire greatly for his enthusiasm, for his righteousness, but with the weed that grew up beside him, he was bigoted, and his intolerance was terrible. I see a person who has a remarkable concentration of gifts, but the weed of unlovely pride grows right up beside him. God alone can deal with such types of weeds. But our mothers aren't like that, are they? We know that they are proving to us that they are the best. Mother's vine goeth deep into the soil. Read that in Psalm 80, verse 9. This gives us a suggestion that here is a contrast with the desert plant that spreads out its roots on the surface. And when the heat comes and the wind blows, it becomes a tumbleweed. Shallow rooting makes tumbleweed children of God. A prominent minister in a church said, I must take 3 members into the church before I get one good one. Well, let's hope that's not so. Let's hope that was just his idea. Too many root their interest in the surface things of the church. The sociability of the church, what the church does for the community, the appeal of personality to members, programs for youth and help the youth. All this is very good. but it is not rootage that brings forth fruit. Let an emergency come in the church's life, or let a project be presented which requires real sacrifice of time or talent or money, the shallow rooting will not meet the test. Mother calls for rootinghood and grounding in love. It is an act that instantaneously or ephemeral growth. It is rooting and grounding in faith. It is not being rooted in beautiful phrases and comforting sentiments and vague aspirations to loving kindness and uplift. Those things which encourage shallow Christian. But we must say, that was a lovely sermon. That is only shallow. But will that sermon put down a deep root to help you to require your own taproot to grow deeper, down into the knowledge of God? So let your vine go deep into the soil. Mother soil is made fertile by her labor. There's a text for this also. She that tilleth her land shall have plenty of bread. Proverbs 28:19. It's very true, isn't it? Notice in contrast that the untilled land grows weeds. Jesus' parable of the sower we could call today the parable of the different kinds of soil, rather than the different kinds of seed. And so there are different kinds of soil in which we grow. Mother's farm had all kinds of soil growing in different places. And Mother knew where the soil was more fertile and more productive. And which kind of soil would bring a large harvest or a small harvest? This is part of motherhood. Mother's branches run over the wall. This was said by Jacob to Joseph, if you remember, when Jacob was blessing his boys. Quote, Joseph is a fruitful bough, even a fruitful bough by a well, whose branches run all over the wall. Genesis 49:22. The contrast to the one like Joseph is one who brings forth wild grapes, as is in Isaiah's parable of Isaiah, the 5th chapter, where the man worked so hard and his grapes were still wild. The fruitlessness of running branches offer its favor to the passerby. This can be expected of any vine that spreads out its roots from good water and sends them through the soil and up either the rack that has been made for the vine, or the ropes that are made for the vine, or an arbor that's made for the vine. Anything that's made and created to make a vine better will present you better grapes. And Mother always sees to that, doesn't she? We worship thee, our Father, aware of all the wonders of thy grace, which you have given to our mothers. Thy mercy, which is the cleansing of our spirits. Thy strength, which is in our inner lives, Christ in you, the hope of glory. The healing and the comfort of our hearts, the guiding light, which shines along the path for the family that Mother is taking care of. Make us ready to heed thy call. If it sends us to the place of duty, may we bear well such responsibility. If we are called to live amid the low and the common duties of the poor, may we do this difficult thing of living an ordinary life well. In all the relationships of life, may we find occasions for serving thee and witnessing for the gospel. And that's Mother's first job, isn't it? give that gospel to the children. That's the most important. But usually preachers' wives are always busy with PTAs, with church socials, with other things that are going on that the children get neglected. But we must remember, the children are our first responsibility. And thank the Lord for good mothers that have brought up our children. And so we bring this day into the circle of our group, the blessings we have from our mothers. We want to extend the blessings of Scripture, of some of those that we just read, to you, mothers, that you will continue to have a strong taproot to help this world, that you will never know the good you are doing, even though you may think you are unsuccessful. You are the most successful individual if you do the right thing for your children and for your neighbors. And you will see the world will be a better place in which you have been. God bless you, mothers.